For me, it was unsettling on more than one level. In all the years I had been coming to London and spending time with Sammy Davis Jr., I never knew he had a secret storage unit registered under a fake name. He always paid the rent in cash, month after month, until the day he died. For 30 years, that unit remained locked away in a Burbank warehouse. No one touched it. But when it was finally opened, investigators discovered far more than just old memorabilia. Inside were letters revealing the truth about his real mother's identity, tapes of private conversations that could have ruined careers, and evidence of what really happened with actress Kim Novak back in 1958. Sammy had documented everything. After 3 decades of silence, the truth was finally out. Sammy Davis Jr. was born on December 8, 1925, in Harlem, New York City. His parents, Sammy Davis Sr. and Elvira Sanchez, were both vaudeville performers. That meant Sammy was born right into the world of show business. But there was a side of his life that was carefully kept hidden. His mother, Elvira, was Cuban. At the time, anti-Cuban sentiment was strong in America, and revealing her heritage could have hurt Sammy's career, record sales, and public image. From the moment he was born, his life was shaped by both racism and the pressure to hide certain truths about who he was. Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance was buzzing with creativity, music, and art. It was in that atmosphere that Sammy took his first steps toward stardom. By the age of 2, he was already performing with the Will Maston Trio, an act led by his father and family friend Will Maston. While other toddlers played with toys, Sammy was dancing and singing on theater stages across the country. The spotlight became his playground, but it also meant he never had a normal childhood. He didn't go to school like other kids. Instead, his education came from the road, learning through the people he met, the books he read, and the constant discipline of performing. Touring was exhausting, but it made him strong and gave him a first-hand view of the racial segregation in America. He saw the whites-only signs, felt the sting of being treated differently, and developed a fire inside him to break barriers. At just 3 years old, Sammy's parents separated. His father gained custody and pulled him even deeper into show business. Will Maston became more than a mentor. He was like a godfather who tried to shield Sammy from the harshest realities of racism. Still, no one could protect him completely. Sammy learned early on that talent, charm, and relentless hard work were his best weapons against prejudice. By age 7, Sammy was already making waves in Hollywood. He appeared in the film Rufus Jones for President alongside Ethel Waters, a movie that playfully imagined a young black boy becoming president. Though comedic, it was bold for its time, when black actors were still rare in Hollywood. Sammy's presence lit up the screen, winning audiences with his singing, dancing, and charisma. Life on stage came with sacrifices. He never sat at a school desk or waited for a school bell to ring. Instead, his classroom was the backstage of theaters, train rides between cities, and the pages of books he found along the way. He taught himself new languages, learned to play instruments, and developed skills that no traditional classroom could teach. Even as a child, he wasn't just a performer. He was already a seasoned professional, carrying himself with a confidence far beyond his years. Sammy Davis Jr.'s hunger to learn was as strong as his love for performing. He proved that greatness doesn't have to come from sitting in a classroom. It can come from passion, determination, and a mind that never stops seeking knowledge. In 1943, his life took a dramatic turn. At just 18 years old, standing 5 feet 6 inches and weighing only 120 pounds, Sammy was drafted into the U.S. Army. He left the comfort of the stage and entered a world that was far harsher. He was placed in one of the first integrated units, but the idea of unity was an illusion. From the moment he arrived, racism was everywhere. The very first soldier he met greeted him with a racial slur. His talent, which had opened so many doors in civilian life, meant nothing in uniform. What followed was a daily fight for survival. He faced constant abuse, physical, emotional, and psychological. White soldiers kidnapped him and cruelly painted his skin white from head to toe, mocking his identity. They tricked him into drinking beer laced with urine, urinated on him at night, and broke his nose 3 times. The humiliation went further, They forced him to perform on stage with racial slurs scrawled across his forehead. One freezing night, they tied him to a tree and left him outside, sending a clear message. No matter where he went or what he achieved, society would try to remind him of his place. The army looked the other way, never stepping in to protect him. The worst attack came when a group of soldiers beat him so badly he spent 3 days in the hospital. It wasn't random, it was meant to punish him. No one was held responsible. Lying in that hospital bed, Sammy realized he could only depend on his own strength to survive. The pain pushed him to the edge. He even thought about ending his life. But something pulled him back. That something was performing. When he joined the Army's entertainment unit, he discovered his way to fight back, not with fists, but with his voice, his dancing, and his showmanship. Even those who hated him couldn't deny his talent. Their applause gave him a sense of power, and it helped him heal. By the time Sammy returned from military service in 1951, he was ready to take on the entertainment world with a new sense of determination. That chance came at Ciro's, one of the most glamorous nightclubs on Sunset Boulevard. In March 1951, as part of the Will Maston Trio, he opened for Janice Page. The performance was electric. That same year, after the Academy Awards, Ciro's was packed with Hollywood legends: Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Cary Grant, Marilyn Monroe, and Judy Garland. They watched in awe as Sammy performed, and that night changed his career forever. Word spread quickly, bookings flooded in, and by 1952 he had appeared on Eddie Cantor's Colgate Comedy Hour. ABC even offered him a $20,000 TV pilot, an unheard-of opportunity for a black entertainer at the time, though it never found a sponsor. Still, Sammy had broken through, and his name was becoming known everywhere. Just 3 years later, tragedy struck. On November 19, 1954, at the age of 29, Sammy was driving his Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles when another car backed into his lane on US Route 66. The crash caused the horn button to smash into his left eye, leaving permanent damage. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors couldn't save his eye. Remarkably, he stayed only 9 days before leaving. Friends like Frank Sinatra stood by him, and instead of his career ending, offers began coming in at 3 times his old rate. At first, he wore an eye patch, later replacing it with a glass eye. He even joked about it on stage, calling himself a one-eyed Negro who's Jewish. The accident also led him to a spiritual transformation. In 1960, while recovering, he read about Jewish history and their centuries-long struggle for survival. A friend, Eddie Cantor, gave him a mezuzah and spoke to him about faith. Sammy felt deeply connected, saying he had always been Jewish in his thinking. He converted, despite facing mockery for being both black and Jewish. He believed this made him stronger, and it inspired him to speak out for civil rights. Even as a major star, Sammy still faced racism. In 1950s Las Vegas, he could headline the biggest shows but wasn't allowed to stay in the hotels where he performed or eat in their restaurants. He refused to accept it. With the help of the Rat Pack, he pressured casino owners to change their policies. By the early 1960s, Sammy was earning $25,000 a week at the Sands and became the first black entertainer to stay at the Frontier Hotel. By 1971, official segregation in Las Vegas hotels was over, and Sammy had played a major role in ending it. Sammy Davis Jr. was more than a singer. He was a multi-talented showman. He taught himself to play the drums, trumpet, piano, vibraphone, and more. He could mimic voices, tell jokes, dance, do impressions, and even perform dazzling gun tricks. No one else in entertainment could do it all, and it earned him the nickname Mr. Show Business. In 1956, he took Broadway by storm with Mr. Wonderful, a show written just for him, something almost unheard of for a black star at the time. Critics panned it, but audiences loved him. The show ran for 383 performances, earning back its $225,000 cost. He kept each performance fresh by blending in his nightclub act, often performing alongside his father and uncle. In 1964, Sammy made history again with Golden Boy, playing a black boxer in love with a white woman. The on-stage kiss between them caused outrage, sparking bomb and death threats, but Sammy refused to back down. His performance earned him a Tony Award nomination, and during that same period, he marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, risking his life for what he believed in. He also made an impact on screen. In 1958, he starred in Anna Lucasta with an all-black cast. In 1959, he appeared in Porgy and Bess with Sidney Poitier and Dorothy Dandridge. In 1969, he shined in Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity. He was also a key part of the Rat Pack films, including Ocean's 11 in 1960 and Robin and the Seven Hoods in 1964. Sammy's television career was just as impressive. He appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show, and many others. In 1966, he launched the Sammy Davis Jr. show on NBC, becoming one of the first black entertainers to headline a primetime network variety show. The program featured top stars like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and Sammy worked tirelessly, giving dozens of interviews each week to promote it. His success opened the door for other black performers to find space on television. His lifelong friendship with Frank Sinatra began back in 1941, when Sammy was just 15, performing with the Will Maston Trio in Detroit. Frank, then 26, was touring with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. From the moment Frank saw Sammy perform, he knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. Over the years, Frank Sinatra kept finding ways to help Sammy Davis Jr. In 1947, Frank made sure the Will Maston Trio, Sammy's group, opened for him at the Capitol Theater in New York. This was a huge opportunity for Sammy, one that changed his life forever. Frank didn't just give him breaks, he also defended him when it really counted. In 1950, Sammy was refused entry to the famous Copacabana nightclub in New York because he was black. Frank was furious. He insisted Sammy come back the next night, and this time, Sammy was allowed in. But Frank went further. He walked in with Sammy, sat with him at the same table, and refused to perform at clubs that wouldn't treat Sammy as an equal. This was during a time when most black entertainers were forced to use separate entrances, stay in different hotels, and face constant humiliation. Frank's actions were bold and risky, but they showed his loyalty. When Sammy was in a terrible car accident in 1954 that cost him his left eye, Frank stepped in again. He paid the hospital bills and brought Sammy to Palm Springs to recover. He didn't let Sammy wallow in self-pity. Instead, Frank told him to get back on stage quickly, warning him that disappearing from the spotlight could end his career. Within weeks, Sammy was back performing, and his courage became legendary. Sammy admired Frank so much that he even tried to copy his style, right down to the curl in his hair. Their friendship gave Sammy the strength to break into Hollywood's inner circle. That bond was on full display in 1960 when Ocean's 11 premiered in Las Vegas on August 3. The film starred Frank, Dean Martin, Sammy, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. They played World War II veterans pulling off a massive casino heist. Behind the scenes, they filmed at night and performed live at the Sands Hotel until the early morning hours. Sammy played Josh Howard, an important member of the crew. The movie earned $5.5 million at the box office, about $55 million today, and the final image of the Rat Pack walking past a casino sign with their names became iconic. Sammy was no longer just a sidekick. He was a star in his own right. By the late 1950s, Sammy was earning up to $25,000 a week in Las Vegas. But even with that success, he wasn't allowed to stay in the hotels where he performed because of segregation. He had to live miles away on the city's west side. Sammy refused to accept this. He became the first black entertainer to get free room and board at the Frontier Hotel, a move that helped break the color barrier in Las Vegas. He also supported civil rights protests and even bought part ownership in the Tropicana. When Nevada finally passed a law in 1971 ending hotel discrimination, it was partly because of Sammy's efforts. And when he died in 1990, Las Vegas dimmed its lights for 1 full minute, a powerful tribute from a city that had once refused to let him in. Sammy's film career after Ocean's 11 continued to grow. He starred in Sergeants 3 in 1962 with the Rat Pack, wearing a hat he borrowed from John Wayne. In 1964, he appeared in Robin and the Seven Hoods, a mix of music, comedy, and gangster drama, alongside Frank, Dean, and Bing Crosby. These films weren't just entertaining, they proved that Sammy could stand toe-to-toe with Hollywood's biggest names, helping change the way the film industry saw black performers. But Sammy's personal life was complicated. In 1957, he fell in love with Kim Novak, one of Hollywood's most famous white actresses. They met on The Steve Allen Show and soon started seeing each other in secret. At the time, interracial relationships were extremely controversial. Only 4% of Americans approved of them, and violent backlash was common. The couple tried to hide their romance, meeting in private homes and driving with Sammy under blankets to avoid being seen. Then, in January 1958, a gossip column falsely claimed they were engaged, and the news spread quickly. Studio executives panicked, and the mob got involved. Sammy was kidnapped by gangsters linked to Columbia Pictures and told to end the relationship, or risk losing his remaining eye, or worse. Even mob boss Sam Giancana said he couldn't protect him. Terrified, Sammy broke up with Kim on January 7th. Just 3 days later, on January 10th, he married singer Lorraine White, a black woman, in what was essentially a fake marriage to calm the press and the mob. He reportedly paid her up to $25,000 for it. That night, deeply distraught, Sammy tried to strangle her, and later his assistant found him sitting alone with a gun. The marriage ended by April. That painful chapter showed how dangerous it was in 1950s America for a black man to challenge the unwritten rules about race. In 1960, Sammy married Swedish actress May Britt in what became one of the most public interracial marriages in America. At the time, interracial marriage was still illegal in 31 states. The couple originally planned to wed at Temple Israel of Hollywood, but after receiving bomb threats and violent warnings, they had to move the ceremony to Sammy's home. Frank Sinatra and Peter Lawford stood by them as witnesses. Both Sammy and May had converted to Judaism before the wedding, making them one of the very few high-profile black-Jewish interracial couples in the spotlight. The backlash was intense. Swastikas were painted on their property. May Britt lost her movie contract with 20th Century Fox. Sammy was even disinvited from President John F. Kennedy's 1961 inauguration, simply because of who he married. They had 3 children together, daughter Tracy, born in 1961, and 2 adopted sons, Mark and Jeff. The family faced constant harassment, from racial slurs on their cars to vandalism of their home. Sammy and May tried to protect their children by surrounding them with friends who valued talent over prejudice, but the world outside was often cruel. Eventually, the pressures became too much. In 1968, after 8 years of marriage, May filed for divorce, citing extreme cruelty and mental suffering. Sammy's affair with singer Lola Falana was the final straw, but their relationship had already been strained by his constant touring and the public hate they endured. After the divorce, Sammy's life spiraled downward. He turned to drugs and alcohol, using cocaine and amyl nitrite to cope. His Beverly Hills home became a non-stop party scene for celebrities, with heavy drinking and drug use. On stage, Sammy remained the ultimate showman, but off stage, he was often drunk, high, and out of control. In 1970, he married dancer Alta Vice Gore in a ceremony officiated by Reverend Jesse Jackson. They adopted a son, Manny, in 1989, just a year before Sammy's death. Alta Vice gave him some stability, but their marriage was still marked by chaos. Their home became known for wild parties, with rumors of wife-swapping and orgies. Through all of it, Alta Vice stayed by Sammy's side, supporting him through his addictions and later his battle with throat cancer. After his death in 1990, she was left with more than $7 million in tax debt. She lost their home and most of their possessions, battled her own drinking problem, and lived in poverty. Still, she worked to keep Sammy's memory alive through tributes and charity work. Sammy Davis Jr. had always been generous, often helping friends, family, and even strangers, but this kindness made him spend far more money than he could afford. Even though he earned millions over his career, he often found himself in serious financial trouble. In June 1972, he reached the top of the music charts for the first and only time. His song The Candyman became a massive hit, climbing to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and selling over 2 million copies. It earned him a gold record. This success was unexpected because Sammy actually disliked the song when he first heard it. But the cheerful melody and his unique charm connected with people, especially younger fans, and it became one of his most memorable performances. Another song that became deeply linked to Sammy was I've Got to Be Me, released in 1968. The song spoke about living life fully and staying true to yourself, no matter the obstacles. For Sammy, these words carried special meaning. He had faced racism, prejudice against his religion, and had even survived a terrible car accident in 1954 that cost him his left eye. Still, he never let these struggles stop him. He often ended his shows with this song, turning it into a personal message of strength and hope for his audience. By the late 1960s, Las Vegas had become the center of his career. He was earning as much as $25,000 a week, and his performances were a mix of singing, dancing, comedy, and spot-on impressions. Audiences were dazzled by his energy and skill. But his impact went beyond entertainment. He used his fame to challenge racial discrimination in Las Vegas, insisting on equal treatment for black entertainers. Because of his influence, the city's policies began to change. Today, his image still appears on casino walls and billboards, a lasting reminder of the mark he left on the city. Sammy also became a regular face on television during the 1960s and 1970s. He appeared on popular programs like The Ed Sullivan Show and The Tonight Show, and in 1966 he even hosted his own variety show. At a time when black entertainers were still breaking into mainstream television, Sammy's success was groundbreaking. He could sing, dance, tell jokes, and do celebrity impressions, winning the love of millions. However, his personal life was much more troubled. His drug use and heavy drinking got worse during the years he explored the occult and other unusual interests. Friends described wild nights filled with alcohol, drugs, and constant partying. Sammy admitted that he wanted to experience everything life had to offer, but the lifestyle left him exhausted and out of control. His addiction problems and infidelity played a big role in the collapse of his marriage to Mae Britt. At times, his behavior affected his career so much that he once walked off stage after singing only one song. He eventually quit using cocaine, but alcohol remained a struggle for the rest of his life. The more he indulged in self-destructive habits, the harder it became for him to hold on to the discipline that had made him a star. In 1987, fans around the world were excited when Sammy decided to reunite with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. For years, people had hoped the Rat Pack would come together again, and now it was finally happening. They called it the International Farewell Tour, but after Liza Minnelli joined them, it became known as the ultimate event. Unlike the intimate nightclub shows of their past, this was a massive production held in arenas seating between 10,000 and 25,000 people, a bold and risky move at the time. The tour kicked off on March 13, 1988, at the Oakland Coliseum. At first, the shows had the same magic as the old Rat Pack days, but the intense schedule took its toll, especially on Dean Martin, who was already 70 years old. The late nights and constant travel were too much for him. After only 5 shows, he dropped out, officially blaming health issues. The tour paused, but Sinatra and Davis refused to quit. They brought in Minnelli to replace Dean, and the show continued. They wrapped up the U.S. portion of the tour in Miami in January 1989 before heading to Japan, Australia, and Europe. The tour finally ended in May 1989. Just a few months later, in August 1989, Sammy noticed that his sense of taste was fading and his throat was always sore. When he went to the doctor, he received devastating news. He had throat cancer. Years of smoking up to 4 packs of cigarettes a day had caught up to him. Doctors told him that surgery to remove his voice box could save his life, but it would mean he could never sing again. Sammy couldn't imagine life without performing, so he chose radiation treatment instead. The process lasted 8 long and painful weeks. At first, the treatment seemed to be working, and he held on to the hope that he could return to the stage. The radiation treatments seemed to work at first. The tumor in Sammy's throat became smaller, and he even managed to perform on stage a few more times. But by the beginning of 1990, the cancer had returned, and this time it was spreading quickly. Doctors said surgery could no longer help him. His voice had faded to a faint whisper, his body grew painfully thin, and his weight dropped to about 60 pounds. The disease slowly took away the very things that had defined him: his energy, his voice, and eventually, his life. On May 16, 1990, at the age of 64, Sammy Davis Jr. passed away. The man known as Mr. Show Business was gone, his incredible gift silenced by the same smoking habit that had accompanied him through decades of late-night shows and endless performances. The tragedy deepened when the truth about his finances became public. Despite earning millions over his 60-year career, Sammy died owing more than $5 million in unpaid taxes. With interest and penalties, the debt had grown to around $7 million, roughly $13 million in today's value. His estate was worth about $4 million, but every cent went straight to the IRS. His widow, Alta Vice Davis, was left to carry the burden. Because she had co-signed their tax returns, she was now legally responsible for the debt as well. She was forced to sell their 11,000 square foot Beverly Hills mansion for $2.7 million, but most of that money went to pay off the mortgage. Even after selling the house, more debts remained. Sammy still owed $2,000 for tuxedos, $3,500 for groceries, and $118,000 on a shopping center mortgage. His life insurance, future royalties, and any other potential earnings were all claimed by the IRS before Alta Vice could receive them. She fought legal battles for years, but by the time she settled with the IRS in 1997, she had lost almost everything. The heartbreak became even more public with the auction that followed his death. In September 1991, over 1,800 people gathered in Los Angeles to buy pieces of Sammy's personal life. More than 500 of his belongings went up for sale. His gold record for The Candyman sold for $4,275. A pair of his tap shoes went for $11,000. People bought his jewelry, scrapbooks, walking sticks, hats, items that had been part of his journey and career. The auction brought in $439,000, but it barely made a dent in the enormous tax bill. Alta Vice cried as she watched her husband's cherished possessions leave her hands. To make matters worse, not all of his belongings even made it to the auction. Some were missing entirely. Among the missing items were 185 pieces of jewelry and an Andy Warhol painting. The story took a strange turn later that year. In late 1991, a 28-year-old man named Matthias Horenik received a bill for $365 from a storage company, even though he had never rented a storage unit. It turned out his ID had been stolen. The storage company, A1 Self-Storage in Burbank, looked into it and realized the unit had been rented using fake information. Concerned that it might contain something illegal, the manager contacted the police. When officers opened the unit, they found something no one expected: Sammy Davis Jr.'s missing personal treasures. Inside was a trumpet, an antique record player, a jukebox loaded with The Candyman, clothing, photographs, important documents, and other memorabilia. Someone had rented the unit just 2 weeks after the auction, clearly trying to hide these items. Investigators discovered that an employee of Alta Vice had helped store them, claiming he wanted to save what was left before the IRS could seize it all. They had used a stolen ID and paid the rent in cash. If they had continued paying for the storage unit, it's possible no one would have ever known. But once the IRS learned about it, they seized everything inside in an effort to recover more of Sammy's tax debt. Alta Vice said she had no knowledge of the storage unit or the hidden belongings. It was yet another sad chapter in a story filled with talent, fame, generosity, and heartbreaking loss. A story of a man who gave the world so much but could not escape the cost of his choices.